And this is the main reason you'll never get out of debt. What's up everyone, David here with Free to Be, and in today's video, I'm gonna cover some reasons why it's so difficult for people to get out of debt. Now, part of the process of getting out of debt is also staying out of debt, and what that really involves is a change in your habits and lifestyle, because without that, you're just going to accumulate debt once again. And I know, probably looking back at the beginning of 2020, a lot of us probably had a similar resolution. We wanted to cut down on any debt that we had. And unfortunately, for a lot of those same people, 2020 didn't work out as we had planned. But that doesn't mean that you need to give up hope or the plan to get out of debt sooner rather than later. Now, before I get started, if you are new to the channel, I cover financial literacy here in an effort to track my progress to financial independence and also to bring valuable content to those who are trying to get to financial independence as well. So if you haven't done so already or are brand new to the channel, please take a moment and just click the subscribe button down below. It's a completely free action to take and it really does help support the channel. And if you're not new and returning, thanks for coming back. Alright, so like I mentioned, getting out of debt is bigger than just coming up with a plan and paying off any high interest loans or debt that you have. It really comes with a whole lifestyle shift that you have to be willing to undertake, change some habits, change your lifestyle in order to really make it stick. But there's a reason that people can't get out of debt. There's a reason why it's so hard to do that, and we're going to cover a few of those today. Now again, these lists are never comprehensive, so if you do come up with some additional methods or reasons people struggle to get out of debt, just let me know that in the comments down below. Okay, so the first reason is probably the biggest reason, is that people don't have a budget in place. Now, I have probably mentioned it over a dozen times on this channel. If you've come across any other FIRE channel or financial independence type channel, they've probably covered it a lot too, but creating a budget is essential to getting your life in order when it comes to finances. Without understanding exactly what type of money you're bringing in and what type of money is going out, you're never going to be able to get a good grasp of your finances or be able to even plan for the future. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to create a budget. And if you haven't seen my video about how to do that, I will link it down below, so go check that out. And I basically cover how you can make a pretty comprehensive budget. Even if you're a beginner and never really built one before, there are some things that you could take into consideration. And once you have the budget, it's all about just maintaining it. The hard part is over at that point, and it's just a matter of tweaking it, keeping track of it on a monthly or a bi-monthly basis. And one thing to remember is budgets are living things. So whenever you pay off some debt or get some extra income coming into the door, make those changes and adjustments to your budget so that you stay on track for any long-term goals. And again, you could see how somebody who doesn't have a budget would probably struggle with getting out of debt, because they're not going to have any real sense of what they're paying towards those debts. They're not going to have any sense of what they're basically putting towards savings or other expenses. It's absolutely vital to have a budget if you're really trying to get out of debt. Now, the second thing that makes it really hard for people to work their way out of debt is if they're only making minimum payments on their loans, on their credit cards, on any kind of high interest debt that they have. Because when you make the minimum payments, you're really not working down that principal at all. I mean, it's very minimal, if anything, and it'll really extend the period of time that you're making those payments. So in a standard example, usually the way it works is if your credit card, if your loan charges you interest, that interest is annualized and then divided into the 12-month periods, and you then have to pay that interest amount plus 1% of the outstanding balance as your minimum payment. So typically in any given month, if you just make the minimum payment, you're really only paying down about 1% of that principal. So figure out exactly how long that'll take to pay down that debt, and it's really just not a realistic way to aggressively target that debt to pay it down. So if you can, pay an extra $20, $30, $40 a month. If you can do more than that, great. Make lump sum payments from time to time. If you get a bonus, or if you're on a pay cycle where you get 26 paychecks a year, you'll get some extra paychecks here and there, put that towards paying down some debt. But the point is, avoid making minimum payments if possible, especially on those higher interest debts that you have. And that'll really help you move things along a lot faster. And it's the approach that I personally took when I was first trying to pay off some of those high interest debts that I had. I was making the minimum payment plus an extra something on top whenever I could, wherever I had it. And honestly, over just a few months, you'll notice the impact that that's making. It'll motivate you to keep paying off more and more as you go through the process. Now, the third thing that makes it really difficult to pay down debt is if you are an impulse shopper. That was me for such a long time. You know, I'd pay off $1,000 worth of debt, and then I'd be like, okay, it's time for me to go treat myself and buy $300-400 worth of things. Or sometimes I'll be sitting at the computer and just be idly looking through the internet, and I'll come across something and I'll be like, I need this item. But in reality, you do not need those things. So if you are an impulse shopper, what you need to do is come to grips with that and change those habits. Personally, the approach I took is anytime I felt the need that I needed to buy something right away, I would put it in my cart, or I would just save a link to it, go think about it, sleep on it, maybe even wait 2 full days. And if it still came up in my mind that I really needed that item, then I would go purchase it. But in reality, a lot of times when you put something aside and that initial urge goes away, you realize that you really don't need it, and you're just better off keeping that money in your pocket instead, especially if you are borrowing to buy these items. Again, early on in my career, I wasn't making a lot of money, and before that, when I was a student, I didn't have any money. So anything I was buying was really putting me in a bigger and bigger hole. So if you are an impulse shopper, try to be cognizant of that, be aware of who you are, and try to change that habit. It's not gonna happen overnight, but if you're aware of it, you can slightly tweak and modify your behavior to change it over time. Now, the next mistake you want to avoid if you're really struggling and trying to get out of debt is keeping up with appearances. Do you find yourself wanting to keep up with what your friends are doing, or just keep up in terms of what you have, the newest gadget, whether it's brand new wardrobe from time to time, buying the newest car, having the newest technology? I mean, do you really need any of that? If you're constantly trying to keep up with appearances, whether it's at your home or externally in a social environment, you're never going to be able to get out of that debt. If you are at a restaurant and a friend orders a high-priced bottle of champagne, do not feel the need that you need to order a similar bottle. If you go out and you see that your friend just bought a brand new car, you don't necessarily need to go and buy a brand new car too. If you are at home and you realize that, hey, I've worn everything in my closet once, that's not an excuse to go and buy brand new clothing. You got to be aware of these things. Are you that type of person who's constantly looking to keep up appearances? Because if you are, that's probably another habit that you need to evaluate and behavior you need to change in order to really make an impact on your debt. Otherwise, you'll struggle with debt forever. And finally, the last thing that really keeps people from getting out of debt is if you're in the scenario that I'm in, that millions of other folks are in, and that having a large sum of student debt, having a large amount of student loans will really put you in a hard place to get out of over a short period of time. Unfortunately, crippling student debt has really just integrated itself with our culture for no reason. I mean, look, education costs are high, but for some reason our financial institutions think it's okay for them to hand out these large loans at really crazy interest rates. It doesn't make sense for student loans to be at a 5 or 6 or 7% interest rate. That is just crazy. And that unfortunately puts a lot of graduates in a bad place. It's hard enough to get out of credit card debt at 12% interest if you have $10,000 of credit card debt. Now imagine you have $100,000, $200,000 worth of student loans at a 7% interest rate. Look, 7% at $200,000 is a lot more damaging than 15% at $10,000. You can get rid of that $10,000 worth of debt in a relatively short period of time. You can take on a second job to pay that off. You'll be done with that in a year, 2 years tops. But if you have $200,000 of debt at 7% interest, you're paying $14,000 a year just in interest. You are paying a little over $1,150 a month in just interest. That is not even impacting the principal amount that you owe. So unfortunately, a lot of folks who struggle with this are going to be struggling with it for a while. So what's the solution with student debt? Well, first and foremost, you need to decide before undertaking any kind of student loan if it's the right thing to do for you. If you're really passionate about the career you're pursuing or the education you're pursuing, and you just need to come up with a plan. For me personally, the way I've been handling it is making sure that I make enough to pay the interest down and then tack on an extra few $1,000s here and there. In no way am I thinking that I'm going to be rid of my student debt in the next 5 years, but the plan is within the next 10 to 15 years to have it manageable enough where then I can pay it off, in one lump sum. So what I've been doing is, like I said, paying the minimum amount in terms of covering that interest, making sure that there's no additional amount being tacked on to my principal, and then making some principal payments here and there whenever I get some extra money, whether it's a bonus, if I sell some things, whatever I end up doing, I pay off a little bit more of that principal every single time I have a chance, and it makes it manageable. But again, unfortunately, having that in the back of our minds, anyone that's struggling with crippling student debt and has that in the back of their minds is never really going to feel financially free. You could have $500,000 of cash saved up in a bank, but if you owe $350,000 in student debt, you're really at $150,000 saved, which doesn't put you in any kind of position to be like, I am financially independent and ready to walk away from my full-time career. So what it ultimately comes down to, guys, is planning. If you plan for your debt, you'll be able to pay it off. If you adjust your behavior and habits, and it's just a two-pronged approach. You gotta make sure that you put a plan in place, stick to that plan, and then change your habits so that you don't fall back into debt down the road. All right, guys, well, that's all I had for this video. Do you agree or disagree with this list? Let me know your thoughts down below. If you're new to the channel or haven't done so already, please take a second and just click the subscribe button down below as well. If you did enjoy the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and we'll see you next time.